So I'm going to start with a quote from Heinz Grill's book, The Soul Dimension of Yoga, where he talks about the ether flow, which, as you know, is this energy which permeates all living things, permeates our body, and helps our movements to flow in a much more natural, lifelike and harmonious way. And this quote says, "This inner ether force must be left to its own natural devices and to its own appropriate wisdom." I'll just read that again. This inner ether force must be left to its own natural devices and to its own appropriate wisdom. So it's very easy when we come into the positions to try and force the exercises, to try and push ourselves. And if we can really step back and make a picture of this ether force, it can allow it to flow according to its own natural devices. So we'll make an effort to do that today, to see how, if we can do that, the movements will attain much more effortlessness and naturalness. So would you like to come to a standing position to start with? So we'll start with the exercise which is called the sunrise. I very often start these sessions with hanging forwards and rising up into the standing half moon. But when we do the sunrise, it's done in a very particular way. It's done in such a way, exactly according to the sentence that I read out, that we imagine that the ether forces are left to their own natural devices. So just have a very careful look at how this flowing up of the body looks before you join in. So we'll start with a few moments of hanging down so that we can really relax and become more aware of the breath. And then when we do come up, we can come up with this idea that the ether forces are left to their own natural devices and they just carry us up. This is very, very natural. So we'll do this movement a few times. Just stand with your feet firmly on the ground and then bend down and hang forwards. So we'll have a little pause. First of all, we can become aware of our breath. Make sure the shoulders are relaxed. The ether force needs space in order to be able to flow. So now we can picture just a very natural floating movement upwards, and we can come up in that way, rising up, as if the ether force itself carries the body upwards into a long, growing stream, right up through to the fingertips. And we'll repeat that a few times because repetition actually is what helps the ether to flow. So first of all, good stable feet and legs. The upper body really just hanging. Be aware that the shoulders are relaxed. Space all around the neck and the head. Breath flowing. Now we picture that rising up movement, wafting up, making a gentle circle and gradually allowing the ether force to carry you up through the spine, through the upper part of the spine between the shoulder blades, through the arms to the fingertips. Take the hands down again. As we do this repeated times, we should be able to grow a little longer each time, but not through forcing. Once again, we relax. Space all around the head. Space in the breath.
The ether force must be left to its own natural devices, its own appropriate wisdom. We start gliding up. Let the ether force carry the spine upwards. The feet stay firmly rooted. The legs drawn together. The ether flows up through the spine, through between the shoulder blades, through the arms, up to the fingertips, intensifying. And then take the hands down. We'll do this one more time. Good firm legs. Upper body really free. Shoulders, neck, and head and face relaxed. Free, spacious breath. And we make a mental note before we come up that the ether force must be left to its own natural devices and its own appropriate wisdom. And then we can glide up in this circular movement, letting the breath flow all the time so the ether force has its own natural space, but picturing how this flow can carry us up in this lengthening movement right through the spine and arms, up to the fingertips, and then eventually take the hands down. So we'll come to the sun prayer, and for today's practice, let's stay with this picture of flowing ether forces rising up through the spine and carrying us up into this graceful length. We can take our awareness more to the solar plexus as being the centering point for the ether forces today. So take the hands together, take the arms up, rising up from the solar plexus right through, then coming down, looking down towards the ground. Take the right foot back, form a base with the legs. Now picture the ether force gliding up through the spine, through the arms, up to the fingertips. Then come into the plank. Take the knees down, chest and face down, glide along the ground, and open into the cobra. Push into the downward dog. Right foot forward, forming the base with the legs, rising up through the spine, through the arms to the fingertips. And the other foot forward. Rising up once again and grow, breath flowing, and take the hands down. Hands together. Take the arms up so the body is carried by these naturally flowing ether forces. Look towards the ground, left foot back, half moon, and then the plank. Knees, chest and face down. Cobra. Downward dog. Left foot forward. Half moon. Right foot forward. Standing half moon. And take the hands down. Let's continue with 2 more successive rounds without stopping so that we start to get a rhythm, because the ether loves rhythm. Bending forwards. Right foot back, we get repetition. Repetition can build up the naturally flowing ether forces. Come to the plank. Hollow the back, face down. Cobra. Push into the triangle. Take the right foot forward, forming the base. We can start to feel how with these repeated movements backwards and forwards, a more natural flow with its own appropriate wisdom, its own natural devices. It starts to carry the body more easily. Let's continue, hands together, arms flowing and gliding up. We never have to force or push. Looking down, we're carried by these naturally flowing ether forces, rising into the half moon, gliding up, coming into the plank. Take the knees down, chest and face down, rise into the cobra. Push into downward dog. Left foot forward. Rising right up into the half moon. And the other foot forward. Coming up once again and grow. Flowing all the way up. And hands down. And we'll continue one more round. Remember that if the ether forces are left to flow according to their natural devices, we can maybe allow the movement to come into a more intensive length, a greater stretch, but without pushing, as if it's carried by these forces. So you can see if the ether forces are allowing our body to stretch a bit more now, a bit further in each of these movements. Downward dog, long, long stretch. Right foot forward. You can really find a good growth through the legs and a good long growth through the upper body. And the other foot forward, again, lengthening the legs, moving down through the spine, rising up, and this long, long growth right through to the fingertips. Hands down, and finally the other side, hands together. Good long, long growth. Coming down, lengthening the legs, lengthening the back. Left foot back. And then rising right up through the half moon position. And then the plank. Take the knees down, chest and face down, and then come into the cobra. And push into the downward dog. Long, long stretch. Take the left foot forward. Good growth through the legs. Rising right up through to the fingertips. And then the other foot forward. Coming up once again, gliding up, and take the hands down. So in the solar plexus, in the sun prayer, the ether forces flow from the solar plexus center. So we'll come next to the tree, where we can guide the ether forces back to the heart center. Let's just do this gesture standing on both feet to begin with. Feet firmly on the ground, the hands spread out into the room. And then we take the hands together. This is the gesture. The hands come together at the heart. They meet at the heart center. We could almost imagine that the hands, let's do the gesture again. The hands follow the direction of the ether flow. Inwards to the heart, until we feel the palms connecting. Let's do that one more time. It's quite interesting to feel quite consciously those palms meeting each other at the center. We will bring the hands inwards to meet at the center. So now let's do the movement standing on one foot. So you can take your other foot up onto your knee, or you can bring it right up onto your thigh.
Or if possible, you can take it right up into the groin. You have to turn the sole of the foot to face upwards and bring that knee backwards. You can push it quite far back, and then it helps to wedge your foot in your groin. Once again, take the hands outwards and quite consciously draw them together to meet at the heart center. Let the breath flow. Keep the awareness at the heart center. And come back down again. Okay, feel both feet on the ground, feel the upright posture, and then take your other foot up. Take the hands out into the space. And now a conscious movement of the hands coming together to meet at the heart center. Take the hands down and the foot down. So, can you come down to a sitting position? This next exercise, we're going to do some arm movements, which can once again help to get the feeling of these ether forces that flow upwards. I mentioned that eventually we're going to do the shoulder stand at the end of today's session. And the shoulder stand is a position that rises upwards against gravity, like a plant that grows upwards against gravity. And it's the ether forces that carry this movement of growth. So we can emulate these, once again, with very flowing arm movements, floating up. Can do this a few times, and the important thing is that it's not a forced movement, that we picture ourselves being carried. Let me just remind you again of our sentence. The ether forces must be left to their own natural devices and their own appropriate movement. So let's do this once again. We can picture this very natural flowing movement as if the arms are just carried. We don't know how high they're going to go. We just watch. We allow that ether force to carry us up higher and higher as we get longer and longer. Then you can take the hands down to about hip height and just picture now the ether force is drawing inwards to the heart center between the shoulder blades on the spine. So a natural drawing in of the shoulder blades comes. The arms remain relaxed. Just rest your hands on your lap. Be aware of your spine. It's carried upwards by these naturally flowing ether forces. Let's repeat the movement a few more times, picturing that natural movement upwards. The spine is carried into a length, the arms and the fingertips. Take the hands gently down, they glide down to about hip height. Then we picture the shoulder blades gently being drawn together, and it's not a tight squeezing, but those naturally flowing ether forces left to their own natural devices draw the shoulder blades inwards, the arms are relaxed. Then rest the hands on the lap. Be aware of your spine once again. Has that it naturally feels carried up. It has a natural straightness. Once the ether forces are flowing. One more time. Gliding up. As if we're just watching. We don't even have to do anything. The ether forces do it for us. Take the hands gently down again. Hip height. Picture
picture the shoulder blades as if the ether forces, in the gentlest of ways, draw those shoulder blades into the hands on your lap and just feel how your spine seems to have a natural uprightness without any forcing. So we'll come to a more strenuous position, the sitting balance. And this one is very strenuous, but the challenge is to imagine that the ether forces are carrying us upwards. Let's take the hands up like this to start with. And we can picture that from that thoracic spine between the shoulder blades, there is a movement that carries you upwards, right up through the arms, right up through to the fingertips. This in itself is quite a strenuous position, but if you're able to come into the even more strenuous one, taking the legs off the ground, we'll hold it for about 20 seconds. Let the breath flow. Thinking of the ether forces carrying us upwards, rising up high through the spine, through the arms, out through the fingertips, and then come down again. And just sit in a natural upright position. Okay, so finally we'll come to the shoulder stand. So this one needs a fair bit of warming up in the morning. So we'll start with some rolling, just some gentle rolling along the ground, up a little way, and then back. Let's do that a few times. Again, through repeated movement, we can get a feeling of flowing energy. Starting sitting up, you can round your back a little bit and then just roll so that your body is carried up. The ether forces carry the body up against gravity. So when we roll down, we can feel ourselves carried into this upside down movement. Each time we do it a little bit higher than before. Starting sitting, rolling up, just supporting your back with your hands. When you come up to the sitting position, just take a couple of breaths in between. Think about what you're about to do, and then you can do it again. And one more time. And come back to the sitting position. So the ether forces need space in order to be able to flow. And one of the first things we can do to help find space in our breath, to help find space in our minds, to help find a general calmness, is to feel the ground, because when we feel the ground, it's very calming. Now just have a look, because this can be done in different ways. You can either just keep your hands resting on your back like that if you feel you need some support, and you can feel the contact of your shoulders, your head, and your upper arms with the ground. If you're able to, you can come into this other variation where you take the arms above the head. Do it one arm at a time, and in that way you can also feel the contact with the ground quite clearly, and it can help the shoulders to relax a little bit more. When you come out, you probably want to support yourself with your hands behind you again. Okay, so let's all come into that. When you're ready, from the sitting position, you can roll up. And then you can either keep your hands behind you, you can put them on your back, Or you can take one arm up above the head and then follow it with the other arm. Make sure that the breath stays absolutely free. It's only with free breath can the ether really flow. So now we're going to feel quite consciously our own contact with the ground, the head, the arms, the shoulders. Feeling the contact with the ground can bring a calmness. It can bring a freedom into the breath. And it can help various tensions in the body to naturally dissipate. So take the hands behind you again before coming out and roll back down. So if you're able to, we can try coming up into a straighter shoulder stand finally. So I just want to repeat our sentence, today's sentence, before we do that. So it says, this inner ether force must be left to its own natural devices and its own appropriate wisdom. So when we come to the shoulder stand, we can imagine that this natural ether force is allowed to carry us up. And we do this by picturing it and then allowing it to do its work. The ether force is stimulated through our mental picture. So again, we can do this either starting with the arms above the head or starting with the hands on your back. You can choose. I'll just demonstrate. So you can come up. If you wish to do it with the arms above the head, you can take them up as before. Otherwise, just keep them on your back. Now we picture the ether force. It starts from this point here, the heart center between the shoulder blades. And we need to picture it rising up in a natural way. The shoulders and the arms remain resting on the ground. The spine rises upwards. It is harder in the morning, so you might find you don't come up as high as you would be able to normally later on in the day. Eventually you can take your hands onto your back, and then you can continue the movement a little bit further if possible, rising up into this upright position. Always taking it gradually as your body allows. So, starting in the sitting position, you can roll onto your back. And either just keep your hands on your back like the entire time, if you prefer, or you can take them up above the head to start with. Keeping the head, shoulders and arms resting on the ground. Picture that flowing movement that carries you upwards from the heart center. Eventually, if you want to take the hands back onto your back again, if they're not already there, then you can come up further.
And then when you're ready, roll back down to a sitting position. Only we can just come up onto your knees like this. Take one arm up and stretch up just to tighten up your spine. Stretch right up, opening up your chest in the opposite direction. And then other side. Rising up, lifting up the chest so you feel that tightening right through your spine. Right through. And come back to a sitting position. I'll just repeat the sentence to finish off. This inner ether force must be left to its own natural devices and its own inner wisdom. Okay, so we'll finish the session there.